What's up, everyone? Welcome into another edition of our NBA DFS DraftKings Picks videos, this time for Saturday, December 18th. I'm your host, Bales, and we have quite a bit to go over. Only a six-game slate. A lot of information that needs to be talked about on this pod. Before we get into all that, I do want to kind of discuss the state of the NBA slightly. A lot of people are questioning what they're going to do, whether they're going to shut down, keep going. No one really knows. If people are telling you that they do know, I highly doubt it. I don't know personally. My best guess is probably a 2-week break at some point. I don't think that they're going to do it yet. I think they're going to wait until after Christmas because there's so much money for the league to be made. Um, but I do believe that if everything continues to trend in the way that it is, they probably take some type of break after Christmas, shortly after Christmas, not like the All-Star break, which I believe is February. Um, Shortly after Christmas, they probably take somewhat of a 2-week break, let teams kind of heal up from the whole COVID situation and figure out the rest of the season. That's a complete guess. I have absolutely no clue. They could take a break beforehand. It just wouldn't make that much sense since we are only 8 days away at this point. I guess when this plays, actually, it will be a week away. Christmas will literally be in a week. They could try to power through it. I don't know what the NBA has planned. So for anyone asking me that, it's always going to be the same answer. Me personally, I would expect somewhat of a break, probably around 2 weeks after Christmas, before the All-Star break. I don't know, though. That's just a complete guess based on the type of way that the NBA kind of as an organization is going about. But I do think that the issues with COVID, the issues with all that kind of stuff, illnesses and such are changing slates, and it's making videos like this content much more difficult. These are recorded the night before, so some of the stuff that I talk about just kind of goes out the window. Last night, I did a podcast in which Russell Westbrook was ruled out. That's one thing that specifically really stuck out. Russell Westbrook was ruled out for the COVID protocols. He was actually expected to miss 5 games because I believe that's what they have to do, or around that amount of time. In which then during the day, he got ruled back in. He was fine. Malik Monk, who had already passed the COVID protocols, he had been ruled out once again. A ton of people also on top of that ruled out, which took a lot away. So I guess at this point, I'm saying this early content, it's still consumable. It's still very good. There's no issues because a lot of what does get said still can be taken into account. And we're in this weird situation where when you look at early plays and then stuff opens up where other things get chalkier or something, they become elite GPP plays then. So just because this comes out early doesn't mean that you necessarily shouldn't be watching or you shouldn't be trying to take in all the information. I think you just also need to be kind of adaptable to the point where this shouldn't be your end all be all of research. These videos are meant to help you. Obviously, you always should be doing even more research than just this, but they still can be very helpful. I think you just need to swing it into the context of the slate as it gets closer to lock and more information comes out about what happens, if that makes sense. If anyone has any questions on that, drop them below. I will try to outline that a little bit better. I do still think that these are very relevant kind of throughout the day. It just kind of changed. The slate changes quite a bit based on who's playing, who's not, and all that kind of stuff. But as always, if you enjoy these videos, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. You can subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications, and it'll message you every time we drop a video so you don't miss anything. Comment anything that you want below, any questions you have, all that good stuff. I will answer them. If you have questions about any players, feel free to drop them below as well. Only 6 games, a lot to go over, though, because there's so much news in terms of injuries, illnesses, all that kind of stuff. But I will be outlining my favorite plays at each of the 5 positions. I won't be talking about every single player that I do believe is playable. So if you have any questions on anyone that I didn't mention, or anyone that I did mention, and you just want to know more, go ahead and drop their name below. I will always be in here throughout the day to kind of help out as much as I can. And then also just kind of going on the news is always changing type of deal. We do have a free Discord, chatdfs.com. The link is in the description below. Just click the little show more. You can get in that 100% free. We're kind of discussing the slate at all times. We also have a premium Discord that It's the same Discord. You just get channels unlocked. That is for our core play subscriber. Again, that's kind of where we discuss all kinds of things, to talk about the best plays, who we're going, where we're pivoting, all that kind of stuff. Core plays can be found at dfskarma.com. You can go click on the little subscription button, find all of our core plays. That gets you our premium content, our projections, also our core plays and our premium Discord. But there are free articles on the website as well, plenty for you to consume. Again, just make sure that you as a fantasy player are kind of taking everything that you consume, the night before, throughout the day, all that stuff leading up into lock, kind of take that in the context of the slate, because stuff is constantly changing. Even after lock, people get ruled out and everything. So a lot going on in the NBA at this point of time, with the reemergence of a ton of positive tests and everything, and people not being able to play and such. So I guess it's time to break down all of this injury news. It is a ridiculous amount. So bear with me. I do feel bad for only 6 games. We have just so many players that are kind of in the protocol and can't be used. So there is a game at our Houston, Detroit. It's an early game. It's not on the slate. I'm not going to go over that. But New York, Boston. For New York, Quentin Grimes, Obi Toppin, Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, and Kevin Knox have all been ruled out. Kemba Walker is expected to continue to not play. He got benched a little bit ago. That's expected to be the case. And then Derrick Rose is questionable. On the other side, Al Horford, Sam Hauser, Juan Hernan-Gomez, Romeo Langford left last night. He's not expected to play in this game, but I guess he could technically return. Grant Williams and Jabari Parker all ruled out. Dennis Schroeder was out last night with a non-COVID illness. If he feels better, he will play, but he's questionable at the moment. Orlando, absolutely decimated. They're playing Brooklyn, a second team, absolutely decimated. So at this point for Orlando, Markelle Fultz, Terrence Ross, RJ Hampton, Mo Bamba, Mo Wagner, Michael Carter-Williams, all ruled out. Etuan Moore, Cole Anthony, and Wendell Carter Jr., all questionable for tonight. For Brooklyn, Kevin Durant has already been ruled out. Paul Millsap, DeAndre Bembry, LaMarcus Aldridge, James Harden, James Johnson, Javon Carter, Bruce Brown, all out for at least a few more games on COVID protocol. And Patty Mills is questionable to play, I believe. Or no, Patty Mills has been ruled out, and he's expected to return on Sunday, I believe. Nick Claxton off of the injury list, and then David Duke is probable to play. So just a ridiculous amount of stuff going on there. In the Golden State game, Jordan Poole has already been ruled out. I think that's the only real thing for Golden State. Last night, Moses Moody did start. I guess that's a good thing to mention. Then for Toronto, Goran Dragic out, and then you have Kem Birch doubtful. OG Anunoby is now up to questionable, and Precious Achiuwa also questionable. For the Clippers, Serge Ibaka out, Nicholas Batum and Paul George both questionable. On the other side, Lou Dort questionable. Cleveland, Milwaukee, there's a ton going on here. Isaac Okoro is out. Evan Mobley is questionable. On the other side, you have Bobby Portis, Thanasis Antetokounmpo, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Dante DiVincenzo, Wesley Matthews, all out. And then Chris Middleton, I believe, has missed 2 games in a row at this point. He was expected to play last night. He did not play. So we'll see if he's able to suit up tonight, but he is questionable at the moment. Rui Hachimura out for Washington. Corey Kispert questionable. Spencer Dinwiddie is up to probable, so he's expected to play. And then nothing really that much of note for Utah here. So, just a ridiculous amount going on. It's going to be very difficult kind of to, outline basically everything. But again, that's why I say, and you're probably sick of hearing it, but I say if you guys have any questions on literally anything, drop them in the comments below. It's just because I'm here to try to help. And a lot changes, a lot goes on, and I'll just be there to answer the questions to the best of my ability. I just want to try to get you guys the best information possible. And, at 10 p.m. the night prior, sometimes quite a bit changes, and sometimes I'm not able to go over everyone on the slate, essentially. We all already know that, but just quite a bit going on. So again, for the last time that I'll say it in this video, if you have any questions that you need answered, drop them below, whether it be strategy, actual specific plays for this slate, whatever. I will answer them to the best of my abilities. But starting at point guard, if you're spending up at the top, Steph Curry is completely fine. I have no issues with it, but 12K is getting a little expensive. I would like to drop down to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I played him against the Lakers a few games ago, and he really flopped. But outside of that game, he's been playing really well. Price tag up to almost 9,000, which I don't necessarily love. But at the same time, he gets a plus matchup against the Clippers. They've struggled against point guards. So I do think that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is one of the better options. Drew Holiday has been just dominant without essentially everyone else in the rotation. So I think that if Chris Middleton comes back, Holiday is still in play. But if Middleton's ruled out, you're probably just locking in Holiday at that point. As you keep going down more, it's starting to get tough with exactly what you want to do. I would assume Ricky Rubio could get some more minutes, and at 5,200, that price tag is really appealing for what he can do. I don't necessarily know. I'd like to see who's starting. I don't necessarily believe that Rubio will draw the start, but if he is, he would gain quite a bit of value. And then obviously you have David Duke, who's been playing big minutes. I know he's coming off of more or less a bad game, and he is up to 4,600, which is a bit pricey at this point, but you're getting the minutes, so it's not like you really can complain all that much about him. I do think that he's a solid option for the price tag, and I don't really have too many issues if you want to use someone like that. At shooting guard, if Paul George is playing, I do like him. He's a bit pricey, but Oklahoma City, oddly enough, has struggled quite a bit at shooting guard. If Lou Dort is out, I think that just kind of bumps him up a little bit more. But even at 10.5, I think that he's a fine option, specifically in the matchup. And realistically, I can't imagine that many people really want to spend that price tag for him. So you probably get him at a relatively low ownership. As you move down the slate a little bit more, I mean, there's a few options that do make sense. You have Darius Garland against a banged up, or I guess not necessarily banged up, but against Milwaukee, who is without several players. Josh Giddey, especially if Lou Dort's out, I do think that he makes a really good option. If Dort's playing, I have no problems whatsoever with him. He obviously didn't play overly well against Dallas, but he only played 16 minutes. He actually did perform well in the time on the floor. It's just obviously if you're watching the game log, it's not going to look great. And then the game before that, he really struggled. So could get him at a little bit lower of ownership, but I do think that he's a very solid option. At 4,500, Grayson Allen is just too cheap. I know he's very scoring dependent, and if his shot's not falling, it could be a big problem. Plus, Cleveland's a good defense, but I mean, 4,500 for getting a ton of minutes, it's tough to really kind of back off of him. The same can more or less be said for Gary Harris. He actually started at point guard last night, so Gary Harris at 4,300 does make quite a bit of sense. I do think that he's one of the better options at this point. And then at 3,600, Damian Lee with Jordan Poole out. Damian Lee can at least be considered on this slate. Moving to small forward, Tatum's playing well enough that you can kind of just use him at this point. I do think that that's true again tonight. We already talked about Giddey. Franz Wagner is taking on a large role for Orlando and obviously gets a matchup against essentially the backups for Brooklyn. So I do think that he's a very solid option. I guess as you move down, the guy that makes the most sense would probably just be Pat Connaughton at 5,400. He should be locked into bigger minutes. It's kind of, I don't want to say it's a similar situation to Grayson Allen because Connaughton can do so much more than just score, but he does rely relatively heavily on scoring a lot of nights. So similar situation to Grayson Allen. I actually prefer Connaughton of the duo, but both are fine. Then you have someone like Kessler Edwards, who's locked into very solid minutes for the Brooklyn Nets. He's played well. He's flashed upside. He looked really good in the G League for quite some time as well. So I do think that Edwards is a really good play. And then Chuma Okeke should continue to see plenty of minutes, not an overly dominant fantasy scorer. His production hasn't been great while on the court, but if he's getting 30 plus minutes for under 4,000, especially in this matchup against Brooklyn, no issues whatsoever with him. I actually think that he's one of the better salary relief options because there are only so many guys that, really make sense on this 6-game slate. At power forward, we start to get into a weird spot. Like if you want to spend up on some guys, I don't really have too many issues with it. There aren't many that I necessarily love. My favorite outside of Tatum, who I already outlined at small forward, would probably be Franz Wagner, who also set at small forward, but he's only 6,700. Taking on a large role in the offense, I do think that he's a really good option. You have guys like Blake Griffin, 5,200, still way too cheap. He should likely end up being one of the chalkier options on the slate, and he should be. If he's not, he'll just make a really good option, especially with Kevin Durant out now as well. Griffin, 16 shots in his last game. Even when he wasn't taking that many shots, he posted 30 plus fantasy points in the game before that. As long as he's playing 30 plus minutes, 5,200 is way too cheap of a price tag. And then depending on what the Cavs do, this would be so weird, but I could see something so odd like Dean Wade starting at shooting guard, just because the Cavs love to get those tall guys. And it's such a weird thing, but it's working well for them. I don't think that Dean Wade starts at the 2. I think that would be pretty crazy. But if he does, for some odd reason, draw the start, 3,700 is a solid price tag. It's a little too cheap. Then as you get down, Jordan Nwora at 3,600 is one of the better options, especially if Chris Middleton's out. Jordan Nwora probably gets locked into literally every league that you're playing. So just kind of something to note there as well. As you get to center, I think Rudy Gobert against Washington makes a really good option. He only played 28 minutes against them the other night, still scored almost 40. His price tag is up a little bit, but Washington just doesn't really have the size to do anything about him. So if he's getting the minutes, which they've been inconsistent recently, but I mean, he's a fine option at that point. I think the same can be said for Jarrett Allen. Cooled down a bit in his last couple of games. Obviously, he saw very limited minutes in a blowout against Houston, but the matchup against Milwaukee, they just don't have any good, healthy bodies that are going to stop bigs. So Jarrett Allen does make sense. As you continue down, I would like to say with Al Horford out, I would like to say that Robert Williams is a really good option. It's just he's so risky. The same case was last night. And I know he got a tough matchup against Golden State, but he really just flopped in that position. So I do think that Robert Williams is in play, but almost strictly for GPPs, unless, I guess probably just strictly for GPPs, regardless of anything, because he started last night. He played the big minutes. I just don't personally trust him. I think that there are going to be people that, more or less want to play him in cash games. And if you want to, that's fine. It's just tough to trust a player like that. More of a cash option, I would say, Nicholas Claxton at 4,400. He's performed well, should continue to see minutes in the mid to high 20s. Super cheap. I do really like that. Hassan Whiteside also continues to play extremely well. I don't necessarily want to use him. It's tough to believe that he keeps getting minutes over Gobert. And not that he's getting minutes over him, but he's taking away some of Gobert's minutes. It's tough to believe that continues to happen, and they're probably just doing it because he's playing so well. But as soon as he kind of starts to struggle a little bit more, they'll probably pull him, and his leash is relatively short. So at 4,000 against Washington, I do believe that he's a very solid tournament option. It's just 20 minutes, 45 fantasy points against them in their last game. That really isn't going to happen again. So I think it's GPP viable. And then as you go down a little bit more, you have Robin Lopez, who didn't look that bad last night. If he gets the minutes, he can easily hit value for 3,300. And DeMarcus Cousins, just another guy that's pretty cheap at 3,800 and going to have to play a bigger role for Milwaukee. So that's quite a few that I outlined, especially with it only being 6 games. I know a lot kind of will be dictated by, people playing, people not playing, all that kind of stuff. So just kind of keep an eye on all that. And again, chatdfs.com if you want to get into our free Discord where we talk about all of that. I think that's a really good way to kind of keep up with the injury and stuff. That the channel gets tagged every time people get ruled out. We kind of discuss who's going to benefit, what's going to happen, and everything like that. So highly recommend that. But until then, we should be back on Sunday. All right. Yeah, Sunday for that slate. Good luck. And hopefully everyone wins all.